So look at my ground here, right? Very hard ground here. Some people have said in my previous videos, you should be using a probe, right? Because you're going for shallow stuff. You can't use a probe in this stuff, man. You cannot use a probe in this stuff, right? It's hard as a rock. You bend and break probes, you know, dig about 4 or 5 targets out and snap. Your screwdriver breaks or bends. So I learned that a long time ago, right? Probes do not work in my soil. Even in the winter time, because my clay is so dense here, it just bends probes and breaks screwdrivers because it's so hard. You know, when you have dense clay, everybody has different soils that they're working in. So, and I understand that, you know, I've been detecting for almost 30 years, and I've been testing machines for different manufacturers for about 17 years, almost 18 years. And I know a couple things. I do learn new stuff. Every day I go out, I learn something new. Sometimes I learn something really big. Sometimes I don't learn a lot, but I learn something new. And when I do learn something big, I learn something about all my detectors. You know, whatever I learn with this detector, I can take that knowledge and I can use that on my other detectors too. That's the big ones, right? When I have epiphanies. And somebody commented on my channel just a couple days ago or yesterday. They said, you know, you got air tests, you know, and I'm just gonna tell you, lay the facts out here, right? Air tests have no relevance to the real world of detecting. Air tests, you're not putting your detector under load, and I'll talk about that here for a minute, here in a minute. Somebody was saying, you know, you have metal detector X that goes 5 inches deep, you know, on an air test. Basically, it's a potential test, a depth potential test. Under ideal situations in the open air, and we're never under ideal we're never in ideal conditions, right? We're always putting the detector under load. Let's say a detector X goes 5 inches in the air, and metal detector Y goes 7 inches in the air. Well, that means metal detector Y will be able to detect deeper targets in the ground. That is so far from reality, right? You are not putting your detector under load on bench tests. You're not putting it under load. When you're swinging over the soil, I'm going to put my camera on my head here. When you're swinging over soil, you're putting your detector under load, right? And the wider you swing it, the more it's having to process the ground, right? What I mean by processing the ground is your ground balance. This is not a completely flat surface right here, right? It's bumpy. You got bumps there, and your ground balance is working, right? It's working there. Some people say, you know, just ground balance a machine, right? It'll just shut it up. It's just not how it works, man. I have really mineralized ground here, and the ground balance is basically sensing where the ground is at, right? You can ground balance your machine to this high right here, right? Just ground balance your machine right here, and it's ground balanced to a foot away from the ground. You can also ground balance the machine right on the surface, right? Ground balance it right on the surface. What your ground balance is doing is sensing how close you are to that ground, so it's not giving you false signals. And if you ground balance your machine to 1 inch or 2 above the ground, try pumping your coil this far away from the ground, right? 6 inches away or 8 inches away from the ground. You're going to get falsing tones on it, right? Because you're not ground balanced. And you have to, your detector has to process that ground that it's swinging over on top of the ground balance. And what I'm saying is there's minerals in the ground, and there's also moisture in the ground. And like on the air tests, you're not putting your detector under a normal load, a real load, right? Because it's not ground balanced, and you're not having, that detector's not processing minerals and moisture in the ground, and it's not having to process the EMI that we're experiencing. You know, that's all around us, right? There's EMI everywhere around us. And like on those bucket tests, you know, those bucket tests that they have, they just set a detector above some ground there, above a planter box or a bucket full of soil, and they're taking a target and moving it within the field of that coil. Your detector is not under load. You're not swinging that detector. It's not in motion. So it's not having to process the ground that you're swinging over. That's super important, man. Your detector has to be able to process the ground, and you can't reject too much of that ground. If you reject too much of that moisture or too much of that ground, you're gonna be missing a lot of targets, man. And some machines are really easy to stabilize and to dial in. Some machines are not. Those machines that are hard to stabilize are usually a bigger coil. And take this for instance right here. I can take a machine and have a 11-inch coil and a 6-inch coil, and both of them will detect a dime in a preset program at 6 inches deep. Just swing that dime over that coil at 6 inches deep. With all my detectors, every single one of my detectors does the same exact thing. I take that coin, swing it over 6 inches away from the coil, depth potential, 6-inch coil and 11-inch coil, and I bury that coin at 6 inches deep. Guess which coil will hit that coin better? The 6-inch coil, because that detector's having to process less ground, right? It's having to ground balance less ground, and it's having to process less ground on that, so it's not having to work so hard, right? When you have a big coil, your detector is working really hard to process all that information, all that data that's coming into that control box, right? So just a question answered there. I can't really hunt too much because my ground is so freaking hard. You know, you can see, you know, it's summertime. People have been really wanting some war zone videos. This area where I'm standing right here, I call this the war zone because there's so much iron and junk and trash. I'll be doing some tests here pretty soon once we get some rain. Well, thank you for watching.